Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Wolfpacker Show. My name's Ethan McDowell. I'm here with Noah Fleischman. We're here a day later than usual because we spent all day yesterday on the road back from Atlanta to Raleigh. And we're here to talk about what we were in Atlanta to see. NC State's 30-29 loss to Georgia Tech. NC State drops to 5-6 on the year, needing one last win in the final week of the regular season to ensure bowl eligibility. It was a heartbreaker, Noah. NC State falls into a hole throughout the first three quarters of this game. They claw back into it with a 22-point fourth quarter and fall just short, literally feet short of this game. A 58-yard field goal by Colin Smith drifts wide in the final seconds of the game. It was a very entertaining football game, an exhilarating finish, but a heartbreaking one nonetheless for this Wolfpack squad. Noah, we're going to dive into everything about this loss for the Wolfpack, what it means for the season, and just our overall takeaways for the immediate present, and the future of this program. But before we do that, I want to quickly mention we are both reporters for the Wolfpacker.com. That is NC State's site on the On3 network, the fastest growing college football, basketball recruiting site out there. Right now, you can join for 50% off your annual subscription. It comes out to just under $5 a month. It's a great deal. Encourage you all to go check that out on the Wolfpacker.com. That's where you can join our growing message board community. You can get recruiting scoops, team analysis, our more in-depth thoughts on the football season as a whole, what we're hearing about what's going to happen in the transfer portal, and much more. So just go check out the Wolfpacker.com for all of that. All right, Noah, we were both in Atlanta. We made the 6.5-hour drive down there this week and saw a frankly bizarre football game. It was a really weird football game. The pace at which this game went, we saw 23 points combined in the first three quarters of this game and then 36 in the fourth quarter. So it was a defensive battle until it really wasn't. Like I said at the top of the show, it was a heartbreaker. What are your initial thoughts on NC State's 1-point loss to the Yellow Jackets?
Yeah, this was a game that NC State, was in for most of the game. The defense was, played one of its better games, for the first three quarters, and even into the fourth quarter. It's just one that they came up just short. It's something we've seen them, this year kind of becoming a trend. The first couple quarters takes them to get rolling, and then by the fourth quarter, they become a closing team. They've tried to find ways to figure out how to, break out of that. They've done it a few times, but they haven't been able to consistently put up points in all four quarters, and that's really what's hurt this team the most this year. 22 points in the fourth quarter. They showed fight. They showed battle. They were down. They were never out. And, as you said, that kick comes up just wide. I personally think if it's a 60-yarder, it's good. It had the leg. The wind was going left to right. It was tailing back right. I think if there's a couple more yards, it's going to come back in. Maybe hit the crossbar, but it might bounce over. I think that's how close you were to seeing NC State win the game. We'll talk about what happened at the end and what, the decision-making process looked like. But I don't blame Dave Doran for kicking a 58-yard field goal with Colin Smith. If it goes in, he looks like a genius. If it doesn't, they lose by one. It is what it is. And I think, that's where we're at now. NC State 5-6, looking for its sixth win, and going to have to wait till this weekend against Carolina.
Yeah, we're going to dive into both sides of the football like we usually do in these game recap podcasts. But before we do that, I want to talk about the last minute 40 of this game. So let's just go through it kind of step by step and just give our thoughts on it. And let's start with Hollywood Smothers' go-ahead touchdown. Man, what a run. He is just a special player. Seven rushes for 79 yards in this game, including that 53-yard touchdown. He breaks it off on, I believe it was a 3rd-and-2 play, round near midfield, and gets to the end zone and puts the Pack ahead by 6 after a successful 2-point try. And Noah, at that point in the game, I deleted the story I was writing. I started a new one. I thought they were going to win the game, didn't you?
I did, just with the way the defense was playing the second half. Georgia Tech really wasn't doing anything. Georgia Tech scored 2 touchdowns in the game, Ethan, both off of interceptions. They couldn't drive the length of the field. I thought, this is an opportunity for NC State to get a statement win on the road, primetime game, comeback fashion. but they left a little bit too much time on the clock for Aaron Philo, the freshman quarterback. You never want to second guess, at the end of the game. You do want Hollywood to score, I think, in that scenario with how the defense was playing. It's hard for anybody running down the field 50 yards to think about sliding short to run the clock out. I think if NC State was on the plus side of the field, you might hear the coaching staff radio that in, be like, hey, if you get close, go down. But they weren't expecting him to break off a 50-yard run. He did. And I think if you were at NC State in that moment, you felt good about winning the game with how the defense played, up to that point.
I completely agree. And that's something we talked about. It was a hot topic in the press box after the game of just like how to handle that run. And I just don't think it's fair to point to that as a reason that they lost that game. When you break off a 50-yard touchdown, you have it in your head that you're going to go score. And I understand it. And like you said, yeah, the defense was playing so well. They had allowed, 10 second half points, I think, at that point. And 7 of them were off of the interception, right? Or
yeah, they had the ball.
They got it was a field goal off of the interception.
And then pick off the interception.
Yeah. So they the defense was doing really well. Aside from the possessions they took over in their own territory, they did a really good job in this game. But then things changed on that final drive. The Pack played a prevent defense, and Georgia Tech, frankly, picked them apart. They had a really good game plan for that final drive. They were getting their running back out in the flats, letting him make plays after the catch, getting him in space, pick up easy yards on those first couple plays. And then Aaron Philo, their freshman quarterback who came into the day with 5 rushes for 19 yards on the season, ripped off consecutive 18-yard rushes, including what ended up being the winning score of the game. It was tough, man, because you were out there with 2 linebackers in the game. Sean Brown had left because of cramps. So you had 2 redshirt freshmen responsible for, helping contain the quarterback. And they lost contained. There was no one. The middle of the field was wide open. There was no one in sight. And the defensive backs couldn't get their heads turned around fast enough to realize what was happening and stop those plays as they were happening. It was tough. The defense definitely took a conservative approach to the final drive of that game, and it came back to hurt them. Do I necessarily blame them? No. Georgia Tech had 1 timeout going into that drive, and there was 1:30 left in the game, and they needed 7 points to pull ahead. But Georgia Tech executed really well. And I think it's easy to say in hindsight 2020, yeah, you would have maybe liked to see a more aggressive defense there, but I don't know. That they had to travel 75 yards to, in 90 seconds. And I think you would trusted your DBs in that situation who had covered well outside of just a couple explosive plays to that point.
Yeah, and NC State had defended the run well, and I think they played prevent defense. And in football as a whole, I'm not the biggest fan of prevent defense, especially when your defense is playing as well as they were in a regular base formation with the game plan. But they dropped coverage because there was, as you said, 1:30 left. They had 1 timeout, and Georgia Tech traditionally has 2 quarterbacks that they've been playing the last 2 games. Aaron Filer's the passer, Haynes King's the runner. Aaron Filer's in the game. It's assumed it's a pass. He entered in the game, only had 5 carries for 19 yards.
Yep.
In the previous 2 games. He ripped off 7 carries for 57 yards, 36 of those yards coming on the final drive. So obviously they weren't expecting him to run. He took off and ran, and it hurt him. But, at the end of the day, it's a freshman quarterback taking advantage of what the defense gave him and won the game for his team. So you can't blame him, I guess. Just going into prevent defense, I never am a fan of it. I don't care if it's the NFL, high school, college. It's just one of those things where something's working, why change? Obviously, you want to keep them out of the end zone, and you want them to run the clock, and that was the case. But they scored, and it is what it is. NC State had a chance to block the PAT as well, which was going for 2 was the goal, and then Dread blocked the PAT. They were close, which would have made this a completely different, I think, end of game situation. But yeah. NC State just didn't have enough, to make one more stop after the defense held one of the best rushing offenses in the ACC to 3.3 yards per carry. That was under 3 yards before the final drive, too.
Yeah, you're right. Like, what they were doing was working so well. They should have stuck with it. I agree. They should have stuck with what was really working well, which was, stacking the box a little bit and limiting rushing yards, because Yeah, they gave up, like we said, a few pass plays to like but they were short catch and run plays. If you stick with the original game plan, are those plays there as much? Probably not. So I agree. Uh, of course, NC State still had a chance to win it. They got the ball back, and C.J. Bailey delivered an absolute strike to Dakari Collins, who had a nice day, 3 catches for 42 yards, and set the Pack up with, gosh, do you remember how many seconds? There was 20-something seconds or something like that.
They got the ball back with 22 seconds, and they
Yeah,
got up to the line with about 10. It was like 12, 10 seconds to
yeah.
run a play.
It,
And they were at the 40. What is that? The 41?
yeah, I think it was 10. I remember because we were talking about it, and we were like, it was right on the line between, do you have time to run one or two, and they had one timeout left, right? So they run one play. It's a deep shot to Noah Rogers. Tough catch, goes through his hands. If he catches that, they're in easy field goal range. They call a timeout, and the place probably wins and that's that. Instead, incomplete pass. You have the ball at the 41 with 6 seconds to go, and the Pack used its last timeout with the clock stopped. Dave Dorn said after the game that they wanted to talk over what to do in that situation. Originally, they had 5 seconds left, and Dave Dorn called out the clock operator or the refs and how that whole situation got handled, because they didn't know there was an extra second getting put on the clock until the team was breaking the huddle to come out and kick the final field goal. Doran said that if he had known there was an extra second, that might have changed the calculus on what they did there. Either way, since there was 6 seconds and they used their last timeout, they had to kick the field goal. That was it were 5 seconds as they thought. They thought they had to kick the field goal. And they put in Colin Smith, whose career long was 40 yards. He's kicked 3 field goals in his career, but that decision makes sense to me just because we've seen him do kickoffs for the past several years, and he's got quite the leg on him. So, and we saw it. It, like you said, it almost hooked back in. That decision makes sense to me. In an ideal world, though, you know what you're going to do if that pass falls incomplete with 6 seconds left, right? You have that last second play already ready to go to get, 4 or 5 more yards, make it just a little closer, make it a little more makeable, and you can call that last timeout. But that's not what happened, and Georgia Tech left with a win, a big win for them on senior night, and a pretty crushing loss for the Wolfpack that has struggled at times in these close games. They haven't gotten many breaks in these close games, man.
No, they haven't. I mean, and most of them have been self-inflicted. This was another game of that,
No doubt.
of turnovers costing them. The Syracuse game is another one I think of, turnovers costing them in the red zone. This one wasn't in the red zone. This was turnovers deep in your own end costing them the game. Gifting a Georgia Tech offense that really couldn't move the ball much. 14 free points. And when it comes down to a 1-point game, every play matters, every second matters, as Dave Dorn said. But I know people were talking about Dorn's, explanation of the clock. And they were like, so why didn't you put the offense back on the field after you called a timeout? Well, the problem is they don't have a timeout left.
Yeah.
So if you get a guy tackled in bounds, game's over.
That's it.
C.J. Bailey takes a sack, game is over. And I think at that point you weigh your options. You only have one chance. Is your last ditch effort of put the field goal kicker out there. So I really don't have any, I'm not worried about the end of the game. I think if Noah Rogers makes that catch, which it went off his hands, and at this level, when the ball hits their hands, most guys, are expected to catch it. It was a tough play, but he was there, and that would have easily been a 25, 30-yard field goal from there. And NC State would have had a really, really good opportunity to put Kanoa Vincent probably on the field to end the game. But coulda, shoulda, woulda. NC State has played a lot of that this year, and it just hasn't gone their favor. You sometimes need luck in college football. It's a wild sport. Anything and everything can happen. And NC State hasn't had much luck. They had a lot of it last year, not a lot of it this year. And we said at 5-6.
Yeah, you look back on the past couple of years, and there's been a few games where, kicking luck especially has really benefited this team. You look back 2 years ago, the ECU game, the UNC game, they were definitely the beneficiary of some missed easy field goals. And there's just some multiple occasions where there was some late breaking luck over the past couple of years that has worked in the Pac's favor. And it just hasn't really this year. Outside of the Cal game, where that their kicker missed that chip shot of a field goal that likely would have won the game for them. It hasn't gone the Pack's way, but the fact of the matter is, like you said, they've been in position to avoid being in those situations with better execution before those moments in the final seconds. So I think that's what the focus should be. It shouldn't be on to kick or not to kick. Did it even make sense to kick a 58-yard field goal? That all makes sense to me, but they shouldn't have been in that situation, man. There should have been a better plan for those final 10 seconds that put the Pack in a more manageable final snap of the game, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. And they had a plan for that first play with 22 seconds. CJ Bailey even said after the game,
right?
That is a play call that he knew was coming. He said it's you can't defend it. They knew they were going to get to the middle of the field. He said it post game. It was kind of interesting they didn't have the second play ready to go, because usually if they had that first one installed, he said he knew the play call before they called it out. Then I don't know where the second one was, and they kind of at some point you just second guess.
One was the shot to know.
Oh, the second guess. Yeah.
But I totally agree. Yeah.
You definitely, with 22 seconds, there's definitely packages and teams rosters in playbooks where you've got 3 plays to make something happen with a timeout before you need to put a field goal kicker out there. And the third one didn't work. I will say, we're talking about field goal luck and not luck. Georgia Tech's kicker, Aiden Burr, looked like an NFL leg. And this is a guy who struggles for Georgia Tech this year. He was 2 for 7 from 40 and longer coming to that night. He made all 3 kicks from 40, including a 45-yarder. So in a game that's decided by 1 point, Ethan, luck went Georgia Tech's way, and the kicker, Aiden Burr, that 45-yarder he hit, pure, down the middle, best kick of the day, maybe best kick of the season I've seen by any kicker in this college level that NC State has played in the game. And it is what it is, right? And so as you say, every play matters. And I know that NC State wanted to force them to long field goals, right? They get down there, defense stands up. The odds are he's going to miss, right? 2 of 7, odds are he's going to miss. And even if he missed 1 of the 3, NC State wins the game. And that's just how it comes down to it.
I think that's a good segue into talking about the defense a little more. The defense, I thought it was one of their best performances of the season. Georgia Tech came into this game as the 3rd best rushing offense in the league, and they averaged 3.3 yards per carry. And that average was boosted significantly by that final drive and those final quarterback scrambles by Philo. Jamal Haynes is a really good running back, and he averaged 2.8 yards per carry. He had nothing going. NC State stacked the box, and I thought really did well defending the run. The Pack tackled well, and did what they had to do. They shut down Haynes King as a runner. That was an effective offense for Georgia Tech during their upset over Miami, just having Haynes King in there to run the ball. And he had 9 carries for 18 yards. They did a really good job against the Yellow Jackets rushing attack. And, when you stack the box like that, you're going to give up some explosive passing plays like Eric Singleton Jr. They're really good. Receiver had 5 catches for 106 yards, along with 49. Those explosive plays are going to happen when you just have your receivers on an island. Your cornerbacks on an island all the time. But for the most part, I thought the defense did great. They held Georgia Tech to 5 of 14 on 3rd down, 0 of 1 on 4th down. They got off the field, which is something we really, really harped on in the days leading up to this game, is they needed, when they had the chance to, they needed to end drives, because that Georgia Tech offense will eat up clock. And I believe their average time of possession only ended up being like 2 minutes to 22 seconds, I believe. So they did their job. We've talked about it before. This defense isn't necessarily a defense that you're going to be able to lean on for a win, but they did enough for it to be complimentary football and put the offense in a position to go win this game. It just didn't work out. People discounted the overall performance based on how the final drive went. I thought that was undeserved. This was overall still a really good performance by NC State's defense. That deserves to be mentioned.
Yeah, you talk about the defense. Yeah, the average time of possession was 2 minutes, 33 seconds. Georgia Tech only had 1 70-yard drive, which was their game-winning drive. This is a team that is built to drive the length of the field, on the ground, take up clock, take up yards, and score. NC State did really good at that, and only avoided that. Georgia Tech only had 1 5-minute drive that came in the second quarter, ending in a field goal. Everything else was, 2 to 3 minute drives, and I think NC State takes it. NC State, meanwhile, their offense had 4 70-yard drives. So you see the difference in defense. I do think the NC State's defense did its job for the most part. Obviously, everyone is going to point to the final score and point to the last drive, but before that, they were outstanding, giving NC State every opportunity to try to win the game. You talk about Eric Singleton's 49-yard catch on the near sideline. Well, a couple plays later, Bishop Fitzgerald interception in the end zone, taking away a prime scoring opportunity for Georgia Tech. Another one of those opportunities that the defense really stepping up big. Didn't win the turnover battle, but it gave them a chance. But the turnover battle, at the end of the day, is what cost NC State.
Perfect segue. No, let's talk about the offense, because what a weird day, really weird day for this offense. If you had told me that NC State was going to have 253 rushing yards in this game, I would have been shocked because, again, Georgia Tech's rushing offense is really good. So is their rushing defense. It also ranks in the top 5 of the ACC. And the Pack ran the ball really well. CJ Bailey led the team with 83 yards. Every single one of those yards was on a scramble. So he was extending plays with his feet really, really well when the passing game was not working. Hollywood Smothers, like we mentioned, 7 carries, 79 yards and a score. Kendrick Raphael, 9 carries, 78 yards. I thought the offensive line run blocked super well, cleared out rushing lanes, and the running backs were explosive. They made the most out of the holes that they had and put together some consistent explosive runs. It wasn't just like the Stanford game where they had 40-yarder, 50-yarder, 87-yarder. Like, this was a game where they were just consistently getting like 10 to 12-yard rushes, and I thought that was really, really impressive. It was 8.7 yards per carry. That's their highest average in at least 20 years. That was courtesy of ESPN's David Hale. So just a really, really great day for this Wolfpack rushing attack. And I was surprised and encouraged by what we saw out of that unit, but it just goes – I still just haven't been able to pin down why that part of this offense has been so inconsistent this year.
Yeah, it's really, it's I think something that NC State has been able to figure out why it's inconsistent. Because if they would have been not inconsistent. But NC State had its probably most balanced performance on the ground with 3 ball carriers above 70 yards. They did a 200-yard rush against Stanford, but 3 above 70 I think is even more balanced of a showing. They didn't benefit from any 90-yard runs like they have in the past couple of games where their offense looked really, really good on the ground. The longest run was 53 yards, which you take that. And I really was impressed with Kendrick Raphael too. He ran the ball really, really well. He averaged 8.7 yards a carry and only broke off along at 25. He's a guy who's kind of been up and down, hasn't really been able to get going as much. They fed him a lot, 9 carries, and led the way of the 3 running backs that played. And yeah, NC State, first time above 8 yards a carry since 2015 too. So really good to see.
No, the passing game did not work. It was a bad day for the Wolfpack passing attack. CJ Bailey finished 17 for 30 for 147 yards, 0 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. Georgia Tech wasn't really trying to rush him. The Yellow Jackets finished with 4 tackles for loss and 1 sack because they weren't really rushing the passer in this game as much as they were just standing there and trying to get hands in passing lanes. And it worked. There was, of course, that trick play that was just an all-out disaster. They lined up, unorthodox, but then ran the pop pass, which was the simple part. That was the part that NC State had repped 1,000 times in practice. It didn't work. CJ popped the ball up. It ends up in the hands of Georgia Tech defender's arms, and then they take it to the house for the opening score of that game. And then from there, CJ threw another pick to a Georgia Tech defensive lineman, threw an interception when targeting, I believe it was KC, who was just double covered. He was not open at all on that play. And passing offense was not working whatsoever. But the rushing attack made up for it. And when things weren't working for CJ through the air, and they were covering NC State's receivers well, no wide receiver finished with more than 42 yards. And Jordan Waters had 45 out of the backfield, and 40 yards of those were after the catch. So it was a bad day for the Wolfpack passing attack overall. It wasn't explosive. They weren't stretching the ball downfield at all outside of that one long pass to Dakari Collins on the final drive of the game. So it's back-to-back games where the passing offense hasn't really clicked, also against two of the better defenses in the ACC. So we'll see where it goes from there. Noah, did you have any takeaways from that part of the offensive performance?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things. These are better defenses that CJ Bailey's seeing. There's also more film of CJ Bailey for defensive coordinators to study and pick apart and find ways to shut him down in the pass game. So I'm not, at this point too concerned per se. The running game going well. It's been the opposite mainly, where the running game struggled and the pass game's been going well. So it's one of those things where, give or take, they still had a chance to win the game. And Jordan Waters was impressed with his ability to get out of the backfield and make plays after the catch. As something we haven't seen a whole lot of. So I was really excited to see that. Even though running the ball for him didn't go well, 3 carries for 10 yards, he still made a way to impact the game through the passing game.
It's just going to be interesting to see what kind of changes offensively get made in the off season to, scheme and see how NC State's offensive approach changes next year with this group, because it's clear there's a lot of talent on this roster. And it just frankly has not been fully maximized this fall. There hasn't been the consistency to maximize it. That's for a variety of reasons, including injury at quarterback, CJ's development, but also just I don't feel like the NC State is getting the most out of this really talented group of offensive players. For some reason, the execution isn't there either. I don't think you can fully point at the staff here. It's just nothing has gone right consistently for that side of the ball. And it's going to be a big look inward moment for this program this off season. But yeah, man. So NC State 5-6, got to win one more to get to 500, and it's a big one. It's UNC. CJ Bailey expressed a lot of confidence after the game that they're going to go in and win that game. We know this is a game that Dave Doran cares deeply about, and I fully expect them to come in motivated, ready to play, and play really hard, just like they did against Georgia Tech. I've watched a lot of college football teams that get in this situation and just kind of throw in the towel, Noah. They certainly haven't. I think the effort is still there. That's not one thing where you can just say that this team is going through motions or mailing it in. That's impressed me, but the execution isn't there, and it's not, and that's leading to these losses and making the difference in these close conference games. So we'll see what happens next week in Chapel Hill. It's going to be an interesting one. But before we get out of here, Noah, I think we should let's just hand out a 1 game ball each, recognize a player of the game who stood out despite the loss. You go ahead, man. Who gets your game ball this week?
I'll go with Bishop Fitzgerald. He had a sneaky good year in the back end for NC State. 8 tackles, 4 solo stops, a pick, and 2 breakups. And back end, really, not feeling like there's too much of a drop-off between him and Devin Boykin, who hasn't played this year with an injury. He's played well, and he deserves it. He made that big pick to keep NC State in the game, it was a big momentum play to take away a possible, touchdown that would put up Georgia Tech even more. So I think the former JUCO star deserves a game ball for his play.
Yeah, good pick. I think he has taken a big step forward in run defense and just tackling in general this season. And I thought he was solid in coverage last year, and he's been really good in coverage this year. I think he's been a very, very solid safety for the Pack, and a great junior college evaluation by the staff, and he's worked really hard to get where he is. So happy for Bishop, happy for his performance on Thursday. I'm going to give mine out to Dakari Collins. He was the Wolfpack's best receiver, the only receiver that produced consistently in this game. 3 catches on 3 targets for 42 yards. He was explosive. I thought he was a reliable target for CJ when he really needed it. And it's been in kind of an inconsistent season for Dakari, but I thought he played well in this game. All right, folks. This upcoming week is obviously Thanksgiving week, so our schedule is going to be a little unorthodox, but we will be back with a preview podcast for the UNC game at some point. So stay tuned to your podcast and YouTube feeds, and we will see you all soon for a discussion of a rivalry game where the records never matter in this game. If we've learned anything over past 4 or 5 years in this rivalry, especially it's going to be fun. It's going to be an exciting day. And we're going to preview the Pack's last regular season game, just like we have the first 11. We will see you all then. Thank you all for watching the Wolfpacker Show. We'll see you soon.